Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. Today is Friday, March 20th of 2026. Looking ahead here, we already have PGA, League of Legends, college basketball, tennis, and COD action underway today. 5 sports already going, so good luck to all of you playing those slates. For the rest of the evening, we have 3 more sports coming at you: NHL, NBA, and then we have the NASCAR Trucks Series as well. So should be a super fun day of DFS. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions, get your questions in 1 of 3 ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team. Just can't say enough good things about the Discord. But with that said, we do this show Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, and then we do this show on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, so you can tune in any one of those days to get your questions answered. All right. With that said, let's get SaberSim pulled up on the screen here. And we did have a couple questions come in prior to the show, so we will start there and then just kind of see where things go. So, first question today. User said, I've been noticing in NBA contest review much lower sim average score values lately despite good sim ROI values. How to improve this metric specifically in NBA? Okay, so I do think there is something to be said about this. I think that as we get later into the NBA season, uncertainty tends to go up. And that is because you're going to have players playing lots of minutes who may not have played as much this year. You're going to have more uncertain situations, and you might even have different rotations, right? Teams are trying things out, especially if teams are eliminated from playoff contention, any type of injury, right? Cade Cunningham just got ruled out for like a pretty good length of time. Detroit's trying to kind of figure out their new rotation and what they're going to do there. How is the usage going to be dispersed? We can make assumptions, right? But hey, maybe it's this guy who is going to take on more of a role than that guy, right? So all these things kind of happen, and I just feel like it is okay that your sim average score is a little bit lower as long as your sim ROI is not suffering as a result of that, right? So something I talked about in the past, and we'll show this. So this line is sim ROI, right? And then one side is typically projection, and then one side is ownership, right? So basically where's my pencil? Let's do brush, and we'll do a different color. So any spot on this line is effectively the same ROI. Okay, you could be up at the top, or you could be up at the bottom, and we'll make up a number, right? We'll say any dot is 15% ROI. So the idea here is that you can play a lineup that is low projected, but it has to have low ownership with it. Or you could play a lineup that is high owned, but it has to be high enough projected to effectively offset the ownership. So it sounds to me like you're, near the bottom here of this line. That's okay, as long as your sim ROI isn't suffering. Where your sim ROI starts to suffer is if your ownership creeps up and your projection stays low, right? If we play a lineup here, right, on this part of the graph, this lineup is probably bad, right? If you somehow manage to find a lineup that is high projected and low owned, which is probably very rare in DFS in 2026, this is an amazing lineup, right? This is like a super awesome lineup you want to play like all the time, right? Normally you're hunting for these lineups along this line, so it's okay to be on the low end. I just wanted to say that before we kind of answer the meat and potatoes of your question. So how do you improve sim average score, which is effectively just projection, right? There's a couple common ways to do this. Number one would be increasing your minimum salary, right? The default is 48,000. Okay, I increase it to 49,000, right? Salary and projection are typically correlated. So if you're playing higher salary lineups, then you're more likely playing lineups with a higher projection floor, right? That would be one way. Second way that I like is after you run your build, come in and filter out some lineups that have a low projection, right? So I would say, hey, show lineups with projection greater than X, right? And then every slate's going to be different. Some slates are going to have 5 games. Some slates are going to have 10 games, right? The projection to filter out will vary. The way I handle it is I try and remove the bottom 10 to 20% of the lowest projected lineups. Now, the idea with doing that, right? And we'll build some lineups while this runs so we can kind of analyze it. Let's create a group real quick. And we'll use SaberScore when it finishes. Okay, great. Maybe I should have refreshed projections. It's okay. All right, so we're going to kick off a build here. So the idea with removing the lower projected lineups, it's not to say that those lineups are bad. They can be good. The idea, though, is that the lineup EV is more fragile. So I'll show an example right now as soon as these lineups load. And we're going to go to expanded view for this. Okay. And we're going to look at multiple lineups. Okay, cool. All right. So this is a good enough example. Our top 2 lineups here, right? Both of these are high SaberScore. Okay, our top 2 SaberScores here. We're starting Uniques 1. The first one is 264 projection, 242 ownership. The second one is 261 projection, 209% ownership. So it's literally exactly this. The first one has the, and I'll make this smaller. Maybe that's close enough. All right, this will work right here. All right, the first one is the higher projected, higher owned, right? 264 versus 261, but 242 owned versus 209. So that one's up here. The second lineup is the lower projected, lower owned option, right? They're both on this spectrum, which is why they're both high SaberScores, right? Both lineups are okay. Now, what you need to be careful with, and I want to see if I can find a even lower option here. Okay, this one should work. So we have this lineup number 16, still a positive SaberScore, 67. This one is very low projected, 254, and the ownership is 179. So again, it is following the line, right? It's lower projected, but the ownership is very, very low. The problem with this lineup, and it's not like a really bad problem, but it's something to be conscious of, something to be aware of. The positive SaberScore of this lineup is highly dependent on the ownership being what it is. So it's like, hey, the builder is saying, hey, based on these ownerships, this lineup is good, right? Well, we know ownership varies, right? Small variations in ownership have a bigger impact on lower projected lineups. And That's what I mean when I say the EV is fragile. If something along this ownership spectrum changes, it could be a couple pieces changing small. It could be one piece changing a lot. That could have a really big impact on if this is a good or bad lineup to play, because the projection isn't high enough to withstand the swinginess of the ownership, right? If you take a high projected team, I think these higher projected teams weather the ownership variance a little bit better, right? And that would make sense, right? Like, let's say you played a lineup that was, higher projected, lower owned, right? Which would be this blue line up here. It's like, well, what if the ownership changes and it's like it actually ends up being kind of closer because the ownership was different, right? Well, it's still, the gap between the line is still big enough to protect it, right? But when the ownership changes and the projection is low, then all of a sudden, it becomes on the wrong side of the graph that we want to consider. So that would be my thought process there as far as, looking at the lineups, comparing them. That's why I would filter it out. I think that makes sense. I've also seen users, this isn't something I do specifically, but I've seen users do it. So, or I've talked to users who do it. So I want to mention it. The opposite of setting the filter after the build is setting a rule before the build. So something where you use an aggregate metric, my projection sum is at least X. Okay, so you can effectively set the filter before the build. How users come up with a value to use, that is the part that is foreign to me. I don't know how they come up with that idea. Another thing to keep in mind here is that if you set a rule and you set your projection sum basically too high, the builder will prioritize filling out your pool over building every lineup that meets the rule. So like, let's say you set a very high floor. The builder is building lineups. It gets to lineup 250 and it can't meet your rule any longer. It's saying, hey, I can't build any lineups with this salary above this threshold anymore. The builder is not going to stop and just give you 250 lineups. It will dip slightly below the percentile that, or the threshold that you've set. It will start to dip below slowly, so a little bit and then more and more until it fills out the entire pool. So if you do this, if you do the rule option, I would probably have a backup filter. I would have a filter, a projection filter, where I use the same value and I would just turn it on after the build. And I would say show lineups with projection greater than X. And then the two are the same. If you really, really care about that line that you're drawing, right? That line in the sand, have a filter as well as a backup in case your threshold was too high to start with. And then you can just narrow in on the lineups above that threshold after as well. So those are the big things. Those are like the three main ways I would do that. But that is probably the end of that answer, which is great. All right, next question. What are the pros and cons for turning on or off the avoid duplicates across lineup groups toggle in the lineup setting menu? Okay, so what we're talking about is in the lineup section in the settings. If you click this, there is this toggle avoid duplicates across lineup groups. What it does is say I have, two groups of 20 lineups like so, right? Well, when it is on, any lineup that is used in the top group cannot be used in the bottom group. That is why we see here that the metrics are different, right? The top group average Saber score is 78. Bottom group average Saber score is 57. And we also see differences in the projection, 259 versus 257, okay? So the first one is getting filled, and then it's filling the bottom 20 with a different set of 20 lineups. If I turn this off, it will, think and assign lineups. Now, my aggregate metrics are exactly the same. Why is that? Because both groups are using unique one Saber score, so that's Saber score high to low. The same 20 lineups are going into both groups. So it's doing Saber score 1 through 20. It doesn't have to get rid of those lineups. It can still use them, so it does. And now both groups get the same exact lineups. So the pro of having it on is that you get a unique lineup for every entry. I'm hesitant to say that getting a lineup in more than one contest is bad. I think it's bad in terms of using SaberScore, right? Because SaberScore is there's only one SaberScore for every lineup in your pool. But if you are using contest sims, I would be more open to turning this off. So I'm gonna say this just so it's very clear. For starter users, if you're using SaberScore or Portfolio and you don't have access to contest sims, I would always leave this on. I think it is a good thing to have on when you're on starter. If you are on ultimate, I think it is okay to consider turning it off. You don't have to turn it off. You can leave it on. It's okay. But the reason I would consider it is because if these were two different contests, they both have different number of entrants. They both, they might be different sets of field lineups as far as stakes go. They might be the same. And then they'll likely have different payout structures, right? And ROI, there is not just one ROI, like there is only one SaberScore. Every contest that you're in will have a separate ROI. So one lineup will have one SaberScore, but one lineup can have many different ROIs. So the ROIs are never exactly the same, which is why I think it's okay to have it off. Because if a lineup grades out good in one contest payout structure format, and it also grades out in a different contest payout structure format, I would probably be willing to play that lineup in both contests since it graded out well in each of them individually, right? So I think that is the consideration that you have to make. So again, on starter, I would leave the toggle on. On ultimate, I think it is okay to consider turning it off. So those are my thoughts there. All right. Next question. What is a good late swap strategy for college basketball during March Madness? With so many games tipping off, should we late swap after every tip-off as the Sims update? Okay, very good question. So let's go over to the March Madness slate for today from this morning. All right, let's go over to a build. Okay, so college basketball slate, many start times, right? Starting 9 a.m. Pacific time all the way to 7 p.m. Pacific time, right? Huge 10-hour window here. So for college basketball, we do not have live sims and we do not have live ownership as far as I understand. And we'll check that right now. Yeah, we do not have live sims and we do not have live ownership. So first off, there is no need to swap at every game start time because we are not taking in actual ownership yet. Okay. So that's so if that part's out, what does that leave? That leaves projection changes. Okay. Now, we do not have a college basketball lineup alerts channel just yet. Our team is talking about it internally. But I think that there is enough discussion happening in the college basketball channel that will provide enough insight here. So, and it looks like Eric, one of our data scientists, is doing that manually right now. So this is like what it'll look like. So in the Discord, Eric like posted an update this morning. Hey, guys, be aware of this. And then if it looks like he ran a sim and he said, hey, made an adjustment here, to basically saying to be aware of it. And apparently I can't do this right. Hold on. Okay, it looks like this. He's putting like, hey guys, I ran a sim. These were the projection changes in the sim. This will eventually get turned into a lineup alert channel, like, NBA, where it shows, sims completed like automatically. But right now he's doing it manually. So shout out Eric for providing that info. But as far as late swap goes, this is what you want to be aware of, right? Hey, the projections changed. We ran a new sim. Then I would want to late swap. So you're going to want to late swap for out players. And, there's going to be some questionables and stuff in here. And then for any sim changes. So keep an eye on the college basketball channel directly until the college basketball lineup alerts channel is set up. But that is what I would be looking for. All right. Next question coming up. Hey, Andrew, why are the contest sims so valuable for winner-take-all contests? Thanks. Yeah, so I think this goes back to the contest sims taking into account the exact payout structure of the contests that you're playing. Even SaberScore, right, is effectively a GPP ROI, right? It is a contest with a typical payout structure, and that reflects most GPPs in the lobby, right? A winner take all is, there is, 100% to first, say it's 100 man and 1% cash rate, right? So the contest sim being used in SaberScore doesn't effectively match that. So I think that's why the contest sims become more valuable for winner take all contests, right? If I was playing winner take alls and I was on starter, I would probably consider using like 99th percentile straight and just optimizing for like the highest upside. But the step above this is having the contest sims, which are going to be the best option and the best sorting metric for winner take alls. All right. Next question, when you're building for a slate, what assumptions are you most focused on getting right? And on the flip side, what are the most common bad assumptions you see people make? So as far as things that I'm focused on, I really like to pay attention to, hey, what are the value spots? And do they make sense, right? Okay, I want to make sense of the value on the slate. And then I also want to be aware of what do I need to be aware of the rest of the slate, right? So something I might do is I might come into the status column, filter for questionables, right? I want to see, hey, who is questionable and do I need to be aware of this, right? Hey, Jalen Duren, questionable, Karl Anthony Towns, both are centers here. This would probably open up quite a bit of value, right? I'm assuming Isaiah Stewart was out yesterday, who's the backup center for Detroit. So if Durant is out, well, all of a sudden, Paul Reed is the, number one center on this team. And that's something I would really want to know before the slate starts, right? So I come in here, okay, you guys can't see it because of the question, but Stewart is still out. And maybe if I sort it this way, Stewart is out, right? So if Durant is out too, all of a sudden Paul Reed at 4,200 is the lone center on this team, and he's probably in a really good spot, right? So Karl-Anthony Towns is going to be like a little bit similar in the sense that if he is out, Mitchell Robinson at 4,300 would end up starting and then be another really solid play, right? So what I want to make sure is I'm getting the questionable situations correct. The worst thing I could do is not pay attention to that. Maybe I build a little early. Maybe the Knicks lineup comes out late and then Towns is out and Mitchell Robinson starts and I miss on that value, right? So understanding who is questionable, writing it down, being aware of it, and making sure this is like a checkbox on your pre-slate build process. Like, hey, who is starting? Is this player in or out? Is something I really want to get right. The other thing, again, going back to the value, hey, come in, sort by the value. Who are the highest value plays on the slate? And usually over 6 is like something that I'm looking out for. If you see players with over a 6 value, that generally means, hey, this player normally doesn't start, but they are today, or they're getting extra minutes for whatever reason here, right? So like if I were looking at this, okay, well, the reason Dennis Jenkins is the highest value play is because Cade Cunningham is out, right? I come in here, Cade Cunningham is out, and Jenkins is a point guard, and Cade is also a point guard. So now Jenkins is effectively starting in Cade's place, right? That makes sense to me. So verifying the high value spots, especially when you're getting a lot of exposure to them, right? We're getting 92 exposure to Jenkins here. And making sure you're checking for questionables and rebuilding after any news comes out. That's for sure like the biggest mistake players make, right? Bad assumptions is, okay, I built my lineups, some news dropped, oh, I didn't have Durant in my lineups, I'm good. Like, no, you're not. You actually need to rebuild because somebody else is going to get all his minutes, and that player might be a really good play. So don't miss out on those player statuses, and make sure that you are. I would be keeping an eye on the NBA lineup alert channel. I think another mistake people make is like not being in the Discord and not, being aware of all the changes that take place, right? It can be as small as this. Hey, the lineup is different than we expected, right? One player is starting instead of another. That's going to change the projections alone, right? Players getting ruled out. Jordan Goodwin starts over Fleming, right? And things are going to move. Goodwin gets like a 3-point boost here. That's a big deal, right? So don't miss those, and keep your eye on the NBA lineup alert channel would be my advice. All right. Next question. Do the Sims work for DK tiers? No, we do not support DK tiers at this time. We just support GPPs/tournaments and any type of like cash games, double ups, head-to-heads, etc. So we don't do like tiers. We don't do like second half showdowns, and we don't do like snake drafts or anything like that. So that is something I think we want to support in the future, just not something we've been able to get to just yet. All right. That was all the questions we had for the day, and we had a quick turnaround with office hours on Saturday. So appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. Eastern for our next show. So until then, everybody take care.